Welcome to the Char Chit Chat, a podcast exploring all things biochar related, coming to you from a small sheep and tree farm in the deep south of New Zealand. Hi Simon, thank you for joining me for a chat today. I'd like to start by asking you, who is Simon Day?
Simon Day is currently a farmer in Waiuku, born in Hamilton 68 years ago. Spent most of my working life as a operator and process controller at the steel mill, which is just literally 10 minutes away from this property, which is in Waiuku, but have always had an interest in the farm. I used to lease the farm for quite a few years while I was the job involved was a shift work position.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to keep a reasonable handle on the farm at the same time. What else? Family, 2 boys, wife, teacher. Boys are in their just approaching 30 years old now. So what else? Farm has grown now to it's roughly not quite 100 hectares, about 250 acres. Good big patch of native bush, about 60 odd acres of bush that's been covenanted, and the rest pasture. And I'm currently graze replacement dairy animals for an immediate neighbour. So it's basically dairy support. So I take their calves and take them right through to just before they calve. Quite a convenient, practical arrangement and relatively remunerative. It's more convenient than doing beef because you've got a monthly check, whereas beef is a lot more protracted. It could be up to 2 years before you get a return on your investment.
Yeah, and you have to put all the money into buying the animals too. When
That's right.
someone's grazing on your place, you don't own the animals, so you don't have
No,
that investment capital,
and
right?
it is, in a sense, it's all care and no responsibility. Like if the animal, unless of course it's negligence, and then that's a different scenario. But
Yeah.
if an animal dies, you're not financially out of pocket. Apart from obviously you've got less grazing
Income.
money coming in.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's the basic setup.
So can you tell us what you remember about when biochar first came into your awareness?
Yeah, so my brother, who actually lives on the farm as well, is one of these very inquisitive minds, and he's always looking on the internet and what have you at new ideas and stuff. And so he basically alerted me to the concept probably in about, early 90s. I think he was living in Australia at the time. And sort of in a weird coincidence, my work at the steel mill, which was there's basically like 3 separate plants involved in the steel making process. I was involved in the beginning of the process, which was commonly referred to as the iron plant. So that uses a process of charring coal, of all things. So turning coal into charcoal.
Yeah.
In the presence of the ore, which was the iron sand, basically the sand that you see on the west coast, the black sand.
Yeah.
And so when I heard about the biochar concept, working in that industry, it made absolute sense. I understood the process because that's what I was doing every day of the week. About 14,000 tonne of coal was going through our system. So I didn't have too much of a problem conceptually understanding how you would go about making biochar. Because even though we were using coal, any biomass would react in the same way in those conditions.
Yeah. And so is that 14,000 tons, is that an annual amount?
That's per week.
That's per week. Wow. People don't realize how dirty steel is.
Yeah.
Wow. So wow, your brother was really ahead of the times then if he was
Well,
already reading
yeah,
about biochar and stuff in the early
I think,
90s.
yeah, I think he came to it from the terra preta angle. I think for them
Hmm.
that was that's what they found, the soils that they found, and then they worked their way back to try and understand how they'd come about,
Mm.
and that was his sort of first encounter with it.
Yep. And then did he start making some in the 90s?
No, not really. He was living in Australia with his family, and his wife was a doctor, so he was an urbanite. But yeah, just that interest was what sparked it for me. And then, of course, having the combination of farming and the work that I was doing, and then starting to understand what the potential of the biochar in a farming system could and should be. It
Mm.
was, that's sort of why I've stuck with it, really.
Okay, and so then did you start using it for the farming at some point?
Dabbled in trying to make a machine just more out of interest rather than any real commercial ambitions.
Mm-hmm.
And that was quite successful. I mean, all I did was copy what I knew worked in the steel mill, and so I
Hmm.
just used an auger with incremental air ports, and I'm screwing the biomass through the auger, which was itself sitting in a furnace. And
Okay,
I
so it was a
used,
continuous process then that you feed
yeah, yeah,
material in one
yeah,
end and it comes out the other
yeah,
end.
exactly that, yeah, yeah.
Huh?
And the process was initiated with a diesel burner, so to get the initial to light,
Hmm.
and the biomass was the fuel.
Yeah.
It was good. It was fun, but it was realistically, from a commercial perspective, it was never going to be. You would have had to have scaled it up to an enormous behemoth for it to become anything useful.
Yeah.
It wasn't too long after that little dabble that I discovered the resource that currently exists at the Red Stag dump,
Hmm.
which is where they've been depositing their high carbon boiler ash just outside of Rotorua now for, I don't know, I think that dump's been going since the 80s, maybe even earlier,
Hmm.
and got that tested and analysed, and worked out that that was probably going to be a much more viable and affordable way of accessing and using biochar on the farm.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? I personally know about that, but for other listeners who've never heard of this, could you tell us a little bit more about what that resource is and how it's come about?
It's a virtue of the inefficiency of the boilers. I think there's a couple, might even be three now. I'm a bit out of touch with
Mhm.
with what Red Stag are doing currently, but they're basically burning their own waste wood that's generated from the sawmilling process, and a lot of it is effectively sawdust. It's quite fine,
Yeah.
and you can imagine sawdust isn't the easiest of materials to combust fully. I don't know if you've ever tried burning it on a bonfire or whatever, but you'll burn the outside quite successfully, and then that'll be pretty much it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the air can't penetrate. So what happens? I mean, they've got pretty sophisticated boilers with they call them moving grates. So the whole all biomass is getting moved through the furnace continually,
Yeah.
but they end up with quite a decent chunk at the bottom of the furnace that has seen 800 plus degrees, but it has not seen air.
Mm.
So it's the perfect setup for making char. It's what you would do, if you wanted to make it. That's the environment you'd put that biomass in. The
Yeah.
bulk of it gets burnt, obviously. But, like, it's only a very small fraction that turns into carbon, but it's a small fraction of a huge amount.
Yeah.
And then added to that, the rest of so all the biomass that's being burnt is producing ash.
Hmm.
Some of it is carried away in the waste stream and flow, waste gas, but a lot of it ends up mixed in with the carbon as well.
Yeah.
So that product, generally speaking, it's about 50% carbon and about 30% ash. So yeah, quite a nice, happy solution if you're looking for cheap biochar, which I
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. And then have you applied that to the farm pastures?
Yes. Yep.
At what sort of
I had
scale?
probably initially I was putting it on just neat
Uh-huh.
right at the beginning. Just used to get a unit load, which is like 28 ton delivered, and then dumped in the paddock, and then loaded onto a spreader and just spread it on without any pre-treatment. And then I went through, and that was fine. And then I went through a phase of composting just to try and get a bit more fertility with the biochar. And I used to mix it in with chicken manure and put it in big heaps and let it break down and compost for a few months. And then my latest incarnation, mainly because of the economics of it, is mixing it with fine lime, which is another waste stream coming out of the Chelsea sugar refinery.
Mm-hmm.
Mixing that with my biochar and sweating that. And that seems to be the best results I've had so far by a good measure has come from that blend.
Mm-hmm. So over the years, say on any one paddock that you can think of, how many applications has the paddock had?
It varies. The hill has not had as much
Uh-huh.
as the flats, mainly because obviously the flats are an easy to get over with a truck, and like there's the practicalities of it. And not only that, even though the area, there's 100 acres of peat and let's say there's 60 acres of hill, but that 100 acres of peat grows 3 times the amount of grass that the hill would ever grow.
Mm.
So like it's not really worth targeting. Like it wasn't worth investing the same amount on the hill as it was on the peat. And it's graphically evident. Like the amount of grass that area grows is just ridiculous. And you know that from your rotation. Like when you're moving your stock, like we've got roughly 44 paddocks, I think you could say. They could rotate through the 100 acres and come back, and the hill still wouldn't be where the growth rate is significantly slower.
Yeah.
Consistently, even right through winter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My plan is to put more on the hills as I can afford to.
Uh-huh.
But I'm very pleased with the results that I'm getting so far.
So on the flat country, then how many applications would they have had over the years?
Prior to adding the lime, they would have had consistently probably about, well, that's the thing about biochar is that when you start talking about application rates, the weights are so small.
Yeah.
It's more really the more relevant probably figure is to talk about volume. So I've always sort of thought of biochar from a volume perspective, but
Mm-hmm.
obviously when a truck's putting it on, it's going on at a certain weight. So I actually haven't sat down and worked out how much I have put on, but it would be alarmingly small, I suspect. Like it's like people talk about putting on a ton an acre or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and that's my go-to rate when I'm putting on the lime biochar mix. But the biochar component of that mix, even though it's a 50-50 volume mix, the weight of the biochar compared to the weight of the lime is like 6 to 1. In fact, even probably more.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a tricky, like when you ask me that question, it's like, man, that would take quite a bit to work it out, and
Okay.
it will be a very small number.
Yeah. But would it be like 5 individual applications over the same piece of land over the years, or would it be 10 applications or
I'll
15?
be it'll be probably
Okay.
five
Yeah.
ish, yeah. And really, the restriction there is budget. Like it's, I mean, I would have ideally used a whole heap more, but it has to pay for itself. And it's got to be a viable amendment, not just because I like the idea.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, what have been the results for you?
clover is probably one of the biggest responders. Recovery,
Mm-hmm.
like how fast the pastures regrow. And it's not just all about biochar. It's because I've been improving the farm always. I mean, improving the drainage, improving the species, the grass component. So that's all why things are improving as they are. It's not all about biochar.
Yeah.
And it would be very difficult to pinpoint what percentage of that improvement you could attribute to to biochar. So it's like farming is like that, though, isn't it? Farming
Yeah.
is a very it's very simple, but it's also bloody complicated as well.
Yeah, it is very, very complicated. Yeah. And I mean, unless you've done side by side trials, you
That's
won't be
right,
able
and
to
I
tell.
haven't.
So
No,
it's really
no,
anecdotal. What do you
yeah,
observe
yeah,
in your
yeah.
opinion?
That's right.
And
That's
that's
right.
fine.
The only thing I can say is that I do have neighbours who have very similar, in fact, identical properties, so I can sort of get a bit of a feel for how I'm going compared to how they're going, and I'm pretty happy.
Yeah. Okay, good.
And they're putting a lot of nitrogen, and shit. You see the bloody spreaders going over their place just about every month.
Ah, well, there you go. There's your evidence.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
are you
I mean, I have
applying any nitrogen at all, or you're just
nothing,
relying on the
not a
clover?
not a scary. No, no.
Okay. And is your technique for grazing, is it to put them into one small paddock at a time? You said you got 44 paddocks, so I'm
Yeah,
guessing you're
yeah.
rotating. How long on average would they stay in each paddock? Is it about a day
It,
or 5 days?
yeah, typically a day. It just depends on the size of the mob.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the average is a day. I try and move every day.
And are your neighbors doing a similar type of grazing technique, or are they doing more set stocking?
Well, mostly I've got a dry stock guy on my east side and a dairy farmer on the whose stock I'm rearing on the south side. So the dairy guy, obviously he's into his rotation for his milking cows, moving them twice a day, obviously.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. So if the grazing management is similar, but you're observing that you don't have to put on nitrogen, I mean, I think you're definitely winning then. That sounds great to me. So Simon, what do you use biochar for besides spreading it on the pastures? I'm guessing that you've got other uses for it.
So any biochar that I make on farm, and I've got quite considerable waste wood availability. I've got lots of shelter belts.
Hmm.
So I do, and I have historically made using flame cap, which is in my situation, I just use a steel bar. In fact, quite a few. I line up 3 bars all at the same time, and
Hmm.
basically just flame cap that with suitable sized material, which is usually about no more than maybe 60 or 70 meter diameter branches, and then just run those for a few hours until you've got pretty much a full bath of charcoal and quench it. And then I have used that quite successfully, I believe, as a animal feed supplement. So I mix that resultant char with just a little slither, like a pour little drizzle of charcoal over the top once it's been placed in a feed trough, and just give the animals ad lib so they can basically access that as much or as little as they desire.
Sorry, what do you
And
pour on top of the biochar?
molasses.
Yep.
Yeah, by bulk, you can get bulk molasses delivered, and it's a hell of a lot cheaper than trying to buy in the 20 liters or whatever they sell it for.
Uh-huh.
And you need very little. Like you don't need much to encourage them. I think they actually do eat the charcoal if it doesn't have the molasses,
Hmm.
but they're much, but basically, if you make that amendment, the biochar disappears very rapidly.
Okay.
And I specifically target my younger animals, especially when they're sort of still making that transition from they're weaned, but they're still not. They might still be getting meal.
Uh-huh.
So from a practical perspective, that works quite well because you're already giving them the meal and the trough. So adding a bit of biochar is not a huge extra burden.
Yeah. Now,
But
did
I
you
don't.
have to negotiate this with the owner of the animals?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 I've done it more with my own animals, even though I do grazing. I do run some beef as well. I don't currently have any, but in the past, like 5 odd years or 10 years, I have run beef, and
Uh-huh.
I've made a real effort to give them a real head start, and I've been very impressed with the results of that amendment. And as far as the dairy, I run it past the owner, and they can either say yay or nay. They've always said, yeah, you go for it. But I'm very prudent in how much I wouldn't be quite as gung ho as if they were my animals.
Okay. Yeah.
Because they will eat an extraordinary amount. Like if
Really?
you let them.
Oh, okay.
Incredible. Yeah. 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 No,
Yeah.
they just keep coming. They just keep coming back. And I'm 90% sure it's because of the molasses, but it's not because of the charcoal. But
Okay. Yeah.
I never come across any adverse reactions or results.
Yeah. So the farmer didn't ask you to have it tested, or he wasn't really that concerned. He was actually quite okay with it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Great. And how many years have you been feeding char to animals, would you say? Has it been just the last 5 years or more than 10 or what?
So when I was running I went for a phase where I had my own beef animals
Mm.
and were running them on the same property concurrently. So when I was in that situation, I was feeding biochar to them all the time.
Mm.
Right, I fed it to them right up until almost to they were ready to leave the farm.
Okay.
But of course, it's still, even though it's fairly straightforward and quite simple to make biochar in that fashion, it's not a quick process. Like the amount that they can consume and how long it takes you to make that is, like it's not something that you could devote a lot of time, which I
Yeah.
don't necessarily have, So it's more about, and the weather. The weather's a big thing because you can't, you really have to have dry timber. So
Yes.
that restricts your fuel supply.
Yeah. Yeah. And would you or have you considered feeding the char that comes from the red stag situation? Would you consider feeding
Yeah, well,
them?
I know of farmers, or certainly a farmer that does and has. I'm a bit reluctant to. I couldn't really tell you why. The ash component worries me a bit.
There might be overdosing on one or two
Yeah,
minerals or something.
yeah, because it's pretty high. I mean, the potassium's 3%,
Uh-huh.
um, lime's quite high. So yeah, I don't know. I just haven't gone down that route.
Hmm.
But I'm not saying that it was the right thing or the wrong thing to do. I don't know. I haven't done it.
Okay. No, that's good to know. All right. And you said that initially that you made this machine with the auger. Do you still have that? Do you still use it?
I do. I do. No, I don't use it. I'm thinking about converting it to a barbecue, big smoker.
Ah, okay.
I'm much happier with my flame cap
Okay.
from a just because it's so simple. I mean, this contraption had fans and it had augers and diesel burners. It was pretty, and it had thermocouples, and like it was pretty complicated. Like you're quite involved.
And the main disadvantage is that you need to pre-shred or chip up the material first, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. The best raw material I found to run through the auger was dried out corn cobs from the local plant here that grows maize seed.
Uh-huh.
So part of their process was once they dried the cobs and shelled them, they had all of these empty corn cobs,
Yeah.
very very and very dry. They were down to like 10-12%.
Oh,
So
wow,
that
that's perfect.
yeah, that worked really well. But of course, the yield. You think of what a corn cob is like.
Yeah.
It's mostly air to begin with,
Mm,
and then you turn that into charcoal. So the yield was pretty minimal, but
okay.
it went through the system beautifully. Yeah.
Yeah. I did some research on you, Simon, and I see that you also were involved in doing a burn with miscanthus. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so did we do that was with Miles, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, same story. Very readily charable, but minimal yield because it's basically grass, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, but it certainly works.
Yeah,
That's
so
my
it basically has to become an industrial process with a whole lot of machines and stuff to actually make it viable then.
yeah,
Not really a
yeah, yeah,
or do it
yeah,
yourself type thing unless you really want to spend time on it.
yeah.
Okay. All right, my next question is why are you hooked by biochar? Like what have you seen, for example, in your animal health?
Anecdotally, because I haven't had any scientific analysis done,
Hmm.
but anecdotally from me, When you're dealing with animals day in, day out, you get a bit of an eye for when something's really performing. Just growth rates.
Uh-huh.
No drench. I didn't drench my beef mobs at all, which typically I would have. And I saw no indication of any worm burden,
Okay.
which to me was that's a really nice confirmation that whatever the biochar is doing in the rumen is good.
Yeah. Great. And I'm guessing they had shiny coats, and like you said, they were putting
Yep,
on really
yep,
good weight. So
yeah.
it's a
And
combination of things, right?
one of the funniest observations was when I just thought I'll push the envelope a bit further, and I started to feed them double what I was feeding. So, as an example, I probably had a mob of about 30 at that stage, and they were getting 3 20-litre buckets of biochar every day mixed with molasses, fed into troughs.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I was consistently giving them that either every day or every second day. And I went through a period of about a week where I doubled that. And the only thing I noticed that was different was that their turds started to look distinctly horse-like
Oh,
and black, very dark and very well formed. Like typically, especially at the time of year it was when it wasn't summer. It was quite lush grass. You would expect a fairly loose turd, but these were noticeably well formed.
hmm. Well, I mean, that sounds like what every dairy farmer needs because, I mean,
Yeah, totally,
as I
exactly.
see, it's very much mostly liquid than anything else.
Yes, it is. Yep, yep. Because they're not getting the fibre
Yeah.
in their feed typically, and if they are, they're getting quite a high sugar energy component.
Hmm. 4 liters of char per animal per day. That's a good amount of char. I mean, that's
That's
amazing for the
huge.
soil
Yeah,
too,
yeah,
because
yeah.
they're going to spread it all out in the paddocks for you too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. That's the other thing that I find appealing about that whole approach is that it's a practical way of getting your char into the soil. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't require a lot of effort. And if you can demonstrate that you are actually getting a benefit from feeding it as well, well then, why not?
Yeah. It's a
It just comes
cascade of
back.
benefits.
It
Yeah.
just comes back to the initial cost. What does it cost to generate that biochar in dollars and in effort compared to the benefit?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to see the time when it becomes a standard input into dairying, and
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
when there's enough production, then the price hopefully will come down a bit and make it way more affordable, and then it will be
Mm,
just
mm,
industry standard practice. That would be nice.
yeah.
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 What do you think is needed in New Zealand to make biochar a household topic? And like, for example, with dairy farmers, for them all to know about it and want to be using it?
Well, really, on that scale, like if it's going to become a viable input for the dairy system, it would have to be affordable and available and at bulk. So that's the issue: is the combination of affordability and scale.
Hmm.
So you're talking a pretty big industry, like it's quite a thing to, and how we get there, because obviously that's not just going to happen. It's going to have to evolve by people picking up on the idea and using it and getting the benefits and realizing that it's a viable input to use. So I guess that's our role, isn't it? That's what we're here for. If we believe in it, that's what we should be aiming for.
Yeah. So tell me your dairy connection where you take that guy's animals and look after them and all that, and then they go back to his dairy.
Yep.
Is he not a convert? Is he not trying to
No,
source
no,
char and give it to the animals?
he's just your typical. I mean, he's a good farmer, but he's very much get the nitrogen out. And it works. Like you can't deny. He produces. They put some milk out the gate, mate. I tell you,
Yeah.
it's not like it's not working. So it's kind of hard to change someone's mindset when if it ain't broke in his mind, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe a bit more time. Maybe
Yeah, I
one
think
day
so.
he will
Yeah.
realize, hey, the animals that come from Simon's place, they're just completely different from his own animals
Well,
or
he
if they come
has
from
he
somewhere
does
else.
consistently say it since I've been doing his replacements that he's never had heifers of that quality. Like the in calf rates are really good too. So
Yeah.
so I feel like I'm doing something right.
Yeah, it sounds like you are to me. Yeah. All right. What do you think is needed in New Zealand to make biochar more a household topic? We didn't really get to that.
Well, education and science is what we're lacking. That's probably it's one of the most frustrating things that our institutions of higher learning seem to be incredibly reluctant to do the work.
Yeah.
And I don't understand. It's just to me, it should be a no-brainer. It should be, there should be a hell of a lot more interest and research and science that going on than there is. But what it is what it is. We just keep plugging away. I think we could agree that Australia are certainly making greater inroads in that area than we are.
Hmm.
So I mean, it's happening. It is. Things are moving.
Yeah. Cool. And are there any other interesting projects you are doing with char at the moment?
Academically, I'm very interested in adding biochar to cement to modify the qualities
Hmm.
of the resultant concrete, given that you might want less weight or whatever the end use of that could be.
Hmm.
And I'm sure the work's been done around the world, but we're not tapping into it. And the beautiful thing with that side of, if that's what you're targeting for the biochar, you can use a whole different source of raw material. You can use contaminated treated wood. It wouldn't matter because you're not using that biochar in a biological scenario. It's you're locking it up in cement.
Mm.
I think it's got a lot of potential.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree as well. And do you think it's got potential in the steel industry, like as a replacement for the coal or not?
That's an ironic question. When I was working at the steel mill, I was constantly haranguing the bosses that got. I was in process control, so I was in the control room running the iron making side of things, and I was always very keen on doing a trial. Like, when we get the opportunity, why don't we run some wood chip through the multi hard just to see what happens? Like,
Mm.
because wood chip isn't coal, but it's it's got the same basic matrix. And there was a incredible resistance to that whole notion, and that persists to this very day. Like, it's just, to me, it's mental. And there's a huge opportunity in that plant currently because they are in the process of making probably half of the iron plant redundant with their new blast furnace technology. So we potentially have those furnaces sitting idle,
Oh, so they could be
and
used as
and
experimental ones.
and and still there is no interest. It's like they could make their own coal. Like, they're still buying coal. They could use their redundant furnaces to turn. They wouldn't need to make it into char. They could just torrefied. So it basically brings it up to the same energy content as coal, and it also makes it water resistant, hydroscopic, or whatever the hell you call it. Like, it would be a practical fuel to use as an alternative to coal.
Yeah.
But no interest.
Yeah, I would have thought that the climate change pressure on high users of coal, and industries with high carbon footprint, I thought they would have been under a huge amount of pressure to at least investigate alternatives.
Yeah, well, not in this instance. But then, I mean, I've been out of that industry for 2017 is when I was last sort of involved. So,
Okay.
I mean, there might be things happening that I'm not aware of, but
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like it.
Okay. Yep, that's unfortunate, but do you know why they are scaling down? Why are they reducing in
Be-
size?
because the blast furnace technology doesn't need the same amount of iron because they're using scrap. They make up the difference with scrap steel.
Okay. So they're using then less coal anyhow then.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, they're probably counting that as them doing the right thing and
Well, they
being
got
greener.
they got yeah, they got a whole heap of cash from the previous government to do this blast furnace, and
Ah,
it was based on those concepts.
I see. Yeah.
They got about It was in the hundreds of millions, so it was a big deal.
Yeah. All right. On a positive note, then, besides that positivity, if there is some there, what do you?
Well, it's potential, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
those furnaces are there.
Yeah.
Like the cost of building those furnaces would be absolutely prohibitive if you wanted to start from scratch. But if they're already there, they're on a railhead. You could get your raw material, your biomass there as cheaply as anywhere. They've got cogeneration facilities already all hooked up, so you could generate electricity from your waste heat. It just, to me, it just boggles my mind that it's not, at least hasn't been ruled out. Like if it's not viable, fine, but you don't know that.
Mm.
Yeah, odd.
Can you tell us about your involvement with the Biochar Network New Zealand?
Yes, probably was more involved initially, back in the early days. I'm a committee member. I'm more focused on day to day actually using it,
Mhm.
and I'll promote it to anyone that wants to listen. But that's probably the extent of my involvement.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you very much for talking us through your journey with biochar, Simon. It's been interesting. And yeah, I like a lot of what you're doing with the livestock
Mm.
feeding. It sounds great. Catch up at another point, hopefully, and
Yep,
we'll keep in touch. Thanks very much.
no worries.
All right.
Cheers. Thanks, Dylan.
You're
See ya.
welcome. Bye.